Hey, hello there. This is Natural Fitness Lifestyle. How's everybody doing today? And it's cold over here. I'm in Pennsylvania, and the weather, I think the weather, let's see, what does the weather say? Oh, man. I think the weather is around 39 degrees or something like that. Let me see, 39 degrees. Yeah, around 39 degrees here. So it's pretty chilly, and it's chilly in my room. So that's why I'm wearing the sweater and with the hood and everything else. In contrast to what I normally wear, which is no shirt, shirtless to show my muscles. But today I'm in the sweater with the hoodie, and I hope everyone is more warmer than I am. Hope everyone is feeling warmer than I am and more comfortable. But life isn't always about being comfortable. And on that subject, I want to talk about fitness and gaining muscle, particularly gaining muscle for the person not over 40, not over 50, for the person over 60. Now, if you made it to 60 years old, you should count your blessings because that's still, when you look at it, I mean, if you look at the life expectancy for the male, for a man, back in uh, back in 1940, 1920, I think it wasn't much beyond 60 years old. So, if you reach 60 years old, you should count your blessings. I'm 64 years old, and every year I live, I count my blessings. But, but, I still want to gain muscle. I mean, everybody's going to laugh at me. You want to gain muscle? You're 64 years old. What are you kidding? You're getting old. You're getting smaller. You're disappearing. You're supposed to disappear because you're over 60. But not so. Not so. See, the human muscle is a living tissue. It's a catabolic plus an anabolic tissue, which means it takes complex nutrients and breaks them down to simpler ones for energy. Or it takes the simple chemicals and creates more complex chemicals to build tissue or build organs or and repair organs and repair muscle in the human body, repair cartilage, repair bone. These are the things that, as an older person we strive for. But yet a lot of older people don't are not aware. See, a lot of people are not aware of the concept of anabolic and catabolic, and much less the factors that influence the anabolic metabolism and catabolic metabolism. A lot of people in general are not aware of what things break down muscle tissue and what things build up muscle tissue. So let me uh, create a hierarchy list. This is a hierarchy list. But before I mention the hierarchy list, I'd like to mention that this video is not meant for recommendation or advice. This video is meant for educational purposes only. All right. So let me see here. Well, anyway, listen. The hierarchy. I want to start with the hierarchy list for catabolism. Number one on the list is cortisol. and stress. They're interrelated. Cortisol and stress breaks down muscle tissue for glucose because your body does not care about muscle tissue. Your body cares primarily about glucose. Why? Because the brain needs glucose. The brain is the primary thing, it's an organ, and it needs glucose. It'll break down muscle tissue for glucose. So, under stress, your body breaks down muscle tissue for glucose. Now, cortisol sometimes is also a powerful inflammatory substance. It is a powerful inflammatory substance. And sometimes the inflammation is necessary to for building, for repairing the tissue, for tissues, because it'll allow more water to get into the joints and therefore nutrients. But in the meantime, the inflammation, if the inflammation stays in your tissue, it's not a good thing. The inflammation will, prolonged inflammation will, so that's not a good thing. But the temporary excess water in your tissues, in your muscles or your joints will allow more nutrients. But now here's the thing: the catabolism destroys the muscle and the joints. There are things called cytokines, inflammatory cytokines. Inflammatory cytokines are mainly there to to fight infection in your body. So when there's maybe foreign invaders like bad bacteria, viruses, foreign substances that are toxic to your body will release these inflammatory cytokines. So the cytokines, you could say, are a form of protein, but they break down cartilage. They break down the matrix, the cartilage. They break down the structure of your cartilage. So you're left with less cartilage to cushion your joints, and that's not a good thing. And it's caused by excess. So now we're talking about cortisol plays a good role and a bad role, but when there is an excess of cortisol, it breaks down joint and muscle tissue. So you don't want that. You don't want excess stress. So now exercise can be a stress if you overdo it. This is why a lot of people over 60 are not gaining muscle because they work out too hard. Now, I hear a lot of people chiming in, oh, well, you have to do a HIIT training. You have to go all out. I believe this is a misconception among the over 60 community, which believes that in order to gain muscle, and you see this throughout many videos, recommending maxing out, lifting as much as you can, it induces an excess amount of cortisol. Years ago, there was a book released by Hans Seal, a very famous physiologist. It was titled The Stress of Life. That book was used as a role model, as a guide for many athletes around the world. I repeat, a book titled The Stress of Life. You can look it up. The author was Hans Seal. It detailed many studies done on rats from the effect of stress and excess cortisol. So the stress not only attacks the muscle tissue, your joint tissue, it also attacks your organs, your adrenal glands, to be more specific. Your adrenal glands are the primary organ that helps you deal with stress. The adrenal glands will actually give you more strength. However, when adrenal glands are under too much stress, they will eventually shrink. The vitamin C content in studies have been known to decrease. This was shown in the book, the studies listed in the book, The Stress of Life. So now, if you work out all out, let's say that your maximum curl. So many people don't realize how important it is to cycle your weights. You cycle the percentages of your weights. You can, if you could curl 100 pounds for 10 reps, why are you doing it every training session? Your body will recognize the stress and start breaking down the muscle tissue. It's not good. It is good when your body perceives a stimulus, but not an overstimulus. Every training session is not a competition. This is something that's hard for an older athlete to resist because they're trying to reach, many older athletes like myself, trying to reach what we used to do. Or at least we're trying to get as close and keep as close to what we used to do. But in order to do that, we must understand there is a bridge. There is a connection to that. There's a progression and a regression. There's a ladder, so to speak, of progression and regression. What that means is that building involves stages, not only linear stages, but declining stages. Yes, declining stages. Why? Because the body works on a system of conservation. Conservation, yes, not just utilization, but the body works on a system of conservation. What does that mean? That means that for the future your workouts, your liver, your muscles have to have a storage, a backup amount of energy, proteins, glucose, glycogen. If you deplete these proteins in the muscle, by the way, they're called the muscles that allow the muscle to contract are called actin and myosin. Actin and myosin are responsible for the muscles to link and contract. You utilize all your actin and myosin, your muscle will not have the capacity to replenish that actin and myosin sufficiently. Now I'm not saying it won't, but typically the actin and myosin, the contractile proteins, when under stress, too much stress, remember we're talking about overtraining, maxing out. We're talking about maxing out. The contractile proteins, actin and myosin, will be utilized and will incur a longer time to replenish. Now, ask yourself, once you work out, particularly maxing out, how much is the normal time for recovery of muscle? This is what you have to ask yourself. This is what you have to ask yourself. Because we're talking about declining and increasing progression and regression model. Especially if you look at the fundamentals of exercise, fundamentals of resistance training, way back dating to the 20s, you will see that the period for recovery of a muscle is 48 hours. Standard, fundamentally 48 hours. If you max out and you use up, break down specifically your actin and myosin muscle proteins, it will take beyond 40 hours to replenish those muscle proteins. And once it goes beyond 48 hours, your muscles start to break down. So you have to keep this in mind. The regression model would be to work out to use less muscle proteins in your workout rather than more. Why? So that beyond 48 hours, particularly when the 48 hours window is over, your muscle tissue will have a reserve of the contractile muscle proteins, actin and myosin. You want this in order to go into the next workout. It's like going to the bank and you want to increase your bank account. And each month, you overdraw your bank account. How do you expect your bank account to grow this way? It won't. You will always incur debt. So you can look at your muscle tissue as incurring debt each time you overtrain. Incurring debt going into the next workout. You work out day one, you incur debt in the breakdown of your muscle protein. By day three, remember 48 hours, there will be less muscle proteins in your muscles. It won't magically increase. All these words, anabolic. Remember, we're talking about a regression and a progression. Regress to progress model. Therefore, you don't overtrain. You don't max out. Oh! There's something called you adapt. Adapt in stages. This is something that, I learned when I didn't know, I wasn't aware when I was younger. When I was younger at 17, I was able to clean and jerk 255 pounds at a body weight of 165. I qualified for the junior nationals. My goal was, of course, to go to the Olympics. Why didn't I reach it? Because I injured myself. Why didn't I injure myself? Because I didn't have a regression strategy in my training. I always wanted to surpass the 255 pounds. What I didn't realize is that my body was incurring a muscular depth, a strength depth, an adaptative depth each time. I was fooled into thinking each time I handled a weight that was above 255 or attempted a weight that was in the neighborhood of 255 pounds, my muscular reserve would increase, and instead my muscular reserve was incurring a depth, which means each training session, it was my muscular contractile proteins were incurring a depth, each time greater and greater with each successive workout. So from the beginning of the month, I had greater muscle proteins. By the end of the month, I had less muscle proteins. So there's no way I could have increased the 255 with less muscle proteins because I was using them up all month long. And I never allowed my body time to recover those muscle proteins when you max out all the time. All this thing about anabolic, you need to max out. You're incurring a muscular debt. Would you do that with your bank account? Would you overdraw your bank account each week, each month, and expect to save any money in the bank? No. So why are you doing it with your body? Especially when you're older. Look at it. As you're older, you want to save your money. You want to make sure you have money in the bank. So why are you doing it with your muscle? Why are you depleting all your muscle reserves each and every workout by maxing out, having this notion that it will be anabolic? No, you're overdrawing your muscle tissue. You're overdrawing your muscle proteins by maxing out. You want to have a reserve. You want to have a regression model. Work at a lower capacity to create a reserve of muscle proteins in your body. This notion of maxing out appropriate when already adapted to your muscle with extra contractile proteins. How do you do this? It's called something cycling. You work with the progression model, the regression to progression model. If your max is 100%, you could work at 80, occasionally 85, occasionally 90, 85%. You could look it up. 75 to 85% is the recommendation in physiology. 75 to 85% of your max is the recommended training weight for anyone who's doing any exercise, whether it's resistance training, whether it's cardiovascular training. This is in physiology journals. You can look it up. You will not find in any physiology journal the mention of anabolic, maxing out, HIIT. You will not find those terms. You will not find that terminology, those terms in a physiology textbook. Case closed. Yet, in the media, you're inundated with this idea of anabolic and maxing out a HIIT. But physiology tests, physiology studies never have found and used the terminology HIIT and anabolic. There's a reason for it. Because it's not scientific. Case closed. So if you want to gain muscle, work at the proper percentages, 75 to 85%. In time, your muscle will reserve, your muscle proteins will increase your reserve. You will have an increased amount of muscle proteins, just like your bank account will have an increased amount. It's always putting a little more in there in your bank account, always putting a little more in your muscle reserve of muscle tissue, always putting a little more, leaving a little bit more muscle proteins with each workout. Don't use up all your muscle proteins each workout. Leave a little more. The reserve of muscle proteins will increase each week, each month, each year. But in order to do this, you have to stop maxing out, HIIT, thinking it's going to increase the reserve, which is going against the fundamental principles of physiology. Why do people fail to understand this? Leave your questions. Please, I encourage everybody to leave their questions in the comments section. I wish everybody a great day, and hopefully by next live, I'll be able to show you how I train, because today I do chest and back.